The white dog came out of the storm carrying the last proof that 11 missing Marines might still be alive. Staff Sergeant Isaiah Brooks saw him first, though for several seconds he could not convince himself that the shape moving through the copper-colored haze was real. The sandstorm had swallowed the western horizon nearly 20 minutes earlier, turning the afternoon sky above the desert training corridor into a wall of dust that seemed tall enough to bury the sun. Wind struck the temporary command post in hard, dry waves. Canvas snapped against aluminum poles. Sand rattled across the roofs of the parked Humvees and found its way beneath collars, between teeth, into every narrow seam of equipment. Somewhere beyond the visibility markers, 11 Marines and 4 vehicles had vanished without a working radio call, a flare, or a single reliable location. Then the dog appeared. He walked slowly out of the blowing sand, head lowered, shoulders working beneath a coat that should have been bright white but was now stained the color of old brass. He was a German shepherd, large and lean, wearing a weathered military harness with one strap torn loose along his left side. His amber eyes remained open against the wind. He did not stumble. He did not bark. Clenched gently between his teeth was a strip of orange medical webbing, the kind carried in every convoy trauma kit. Before we begin, remember this. Some warnings arrive as sirens, some arrive as prayers, and some walk straight through a storm on 4 exhausted paws. The Marines near the supply truck noticed him one by one. Corporal Mason Reed lowered the binoculars hanging from his neck. Navy Corpsman Grace Turner stopped, securing a medical case. Captain Lauren Mitchell stepped from beneath the command canopy with one gloved hand raised against the wind. Someone called out to the dog. Someone else reached for a water container. The shepherd ignored them all. A metal bowl was placed in his path, clean water trembling inside it as the wind pushed small ripples across the surface. He walked past it. Grace crouched several yards away and held out a ration packet, speaking in the calm voice she used with frightened animals and frightened people. The dog barely turned his head. His gaze had settled on Isaiah. Isaiah stood beside the open door of a sand-colored Humvee, broad-shouldered and still, his dark skin dusted along the cheekbones and forehead where the wind had pressed sand beneath the edge of his goggles. At 38, he carried the quiet authority of a man who had learned that raising his voice rarely made danger listen. His uniform was neat despite the weather. His boots were planted firmly. Only his right hand moved, closing slowly around the 2 worn tags hanging beneath his collar. One tag bore his name. The other belonged to a K-9 named Rook. Isaiah had not spoken that name aloud in almost 2 years. The white shepherd crossed the final 20 feet between them and stopped. Up close, Isaiah could see the dog's breathing, fast but controlled. He could see grains of sand gathered along the animal's lashes and a narrow scar cutting through the fur near his left ear. The orange webbing in his mouth was damp, not with rain because rain had not touched this ground in months, but with the effort of carrying it across miles of open desert. The dog lifted his eyes to Isaiah's face. Then his gaze dropped to the old K-9 tag resting against Isaiah's chest. Something tightened behind Isaiah's ribs. "Where did you come from, boy?" he asked. His voice was low enough that the wind nearly stole it. The shepherd stepped closer. He did not seek affection. He did not press against Isaiah's leg. Instead, he released the orange strap carefully onto the ground between Isaiah's boots. A small metal clasp remained attached to one end. Stamped into it were 3 faded characters. C7. Grace moved nearer and stared down at the marking. "Convoy 7, she said. No one answered. Convoy 7 was the missing unit. Captain Mitchell looked toward the wall of sand, then back at the dog. "Check his harness for an identification patch." Mason approached from the side, but the shepherd shifted at once, placing his body between Mason and Isaiah. There was no growl, no raised lip, only a quiet decision. Isaiah raised one hand. "Easy. Let him choose." The word surprised him. He had not trusted a working dog's choice since Rook. The shepherd looked at him for another long second. Then he reached forward and touched his nose to the old tag. The contact was light, almost respectful. Isaiah forgot the wind for a moment. He forgot the officers watching, the radio static, and the storm closing over the search corridor. He saw only a pair of amber eyes asking him to recognize something no instrument had found. The dog stepped backward 3 paces. He turned toward the storm. Then he looked over his shoulder. Isaiah knew that movement. Rook had done it whenever a trail continued beyond sight. 3 steps back. Turn. Wait. The white shepherd repeated it. Once. Twice. Captain Mitchell's voice came from behind Isaiah. Sergeant, that storm is moving at nearly 40 miles an hour. We are minutes from shutting down the search. The dog remained still, facing the darkness of the desert. Sand streamed around his legs like smoke around stone. Isaiah bent and picked up the strip of orange webbing. It was warm from the dog's mouth. Along its edge, beneath the dust, someone had tied a small knot used by Marine field medics to mark a living casualty. Isaiah looked at the shepherd again. Who sent you? The dog closed the distance, caught the cuff of Isaiah's glove between his teeth without biting down, and pulled once toward the storm. Then he released him and ran into the blowing sand, not fast enough to disappear, but just far enough to make his meaning clear. He was not asking to be rescued. He had come to lead them back. Isaiah took one step after the dog before Captain Lauren Mitchell caught his arm. Not yet, she said. Her voice was steady, but the wind tore at every word. Beyond them, the white shepherd had stopped at the edge of visibility. His pale shape flickered in and out of the blowing sand, waiting. Isaiah watched him without blinking. The old tag beneath his collar felt heavier than metal. 2 years earlier, another dog had waited for him in almost the same way. Rook had been a dark-coated German shepherd with patient brown eyes and one ear that leaned slightly to the left whenever he heard Isaiah say his name. They had worked together for 4 years. Rook could find a buried radio battery beneath 3 feet of packed earth. He could distinguish Isaiah's footsteps from 20 others crossing the same gravel yard. More than that, he understood silence. On their final assignment together, a navigation system had directed Isaiah's team toward an abandoned service road during a fast-moving desert storm. Rook stopped before the turn. He planted his paws, lowered his head, and refused the command to move. Isaiah had checked the screen twice. The coordinates were clear. The route had been approved. Every piece of equipment said the road was safe. Rook said it was not. Isaiah chose the screen. Minutes later, an old drainage passage beneath the road gave way. Dust swallowed the team. Communications failed. Rook returned through the confusion and guided 3 Marines toward stable ground. Then he went back for Isaiah. The second collapse took the road with it. Rook never came out. No one blamed Isaiah. The official report called it an unpredictable structural failure. His commanding officer told him that every decision had been reasonable. The other Marines said Rook had done what he had been trained to do. None of those words mattered. Isaiah remembered the dog's paws locked against the dirt. He remembered the quiet warning in his eyes. Most of all, he remembered giving the command anyway. After that day, Isaiah stopped working with dogs. He told people it was a personnel decision. He said his experience was better suited to logistics and field coordination. The truth was simpler. He trusted machines because machines did not forgive him. A compass did not look into his face. A radio did not place its life inside his hands. The white shepherd barked once from the storm, sharp and controlled. Isaiah returned to the present. Sand moved across the ground in thin rivers around his boots. Captain Mitchell released his arm and turned toward the command post. The storm front is less than 3 miles out, she said. Visibility will be near 0. Search operations are ending now. Mason Reed had already begun closing the rear door of the nearest Humvee. Grace Turner gathered the medical cases from the folding table. Around them, Marines moved with practiced speed, securing equipment before the wind became too strong. The white dog did not move. Isaiah lifted the orange medical strap and studied the knot tied near its clasp. It was small, deliberate, and nearly hidden beneath the dust. Someone had placed it there for a reason. There are living people on the other end of this, he said. Captain Mitchell looked at the strap. There might be. That dog knows. That dog cannot tell us distance, terrain, or how many people are waiting. No, Isaiah said. But he came through that storm alone. The shepherd suddenly turned and disappeared into the dust. A strange emptiness opened in Isaiah's chest. Then the dog returned less than 10 seconds later. He had not left. He had only gone far enough to check that the path was still there. He approached the Humvee as Mason opened the driver's door, then stepped directly in front of the vehicle. Mason waved him aside. Come on, boy. Move. The shepherd remained seated. The wind pressed his white fur flat against his ribs. He looked at Mason, then at Captain Mitchell, but when Isaiah moved closer, the dog's attention fixed on him again. He lowered his head. His front legs stiffened. His body became perfectly still. Isaiah knew the posture. Rook had used it when he detected a human presence beyond the range of sight. It was not fear. It was not confusion. It was a promise held in muscle and breath. Isaiah crouched several feet away. You found them, did you not? The dog's ears lifted. And you came back for help. The shepherd stood, backed away 3 steps, turned toward the storm, and waited. The same signal. The same choice. Isaiah rose slowly. Captain Mitchell studied him through the blowing sand. You understand what you are asking? Yes, ma'am. The equipment cannot confirm a route. The equipment did not bring us that strap. You have 90 minutes, she said at last. 1 vehicle. For people. If communications fail, you turn back. Isaiah nodded. Mason stared at the dog, then at the storm. Grace placed the medical cases back inside the Humvee without being asked. The shepherd walked to Isaiah and touched his nose once. Against Rook's tag, Isaiah closed his hand around it. But this time he did not feel only grief. He felt a question he had avoided for 2 years. What if trust was not the mistake? What if the mistake had been refusing to listen? He opened the passenger door. Stay close, he told the dog. The shepherd looked toward the storm and began to run. Isaiah climbed inside, carrying the old guilt with him. But for the first time since losing Rook, he did not let it choose the direction. The Humvee rolled forward at a careful pace, its headlights cutting only a few yards into the thickening dust. Halo ran ahead, never farther than Isaiah could see, his white coat appearing and disappearing like a pale signal inside the copper haze. Mason Reed kept both hands tight on the steering wheel while Grace Turner watched the dog through the windshield. In the rear seat, Lance Corporal Leo Carter adjusted the field radio again and again, searching through layers of static for a voice that never came. Convoy 7. This is Search 1, Leo said. Respond on any channel. Only a low hiss answered him. Sand struck the vehicle in dry waves, tapping against the doors and windows like thousands of impatient fingers. Isaiah checked the time. 86 minutes remained. Halo suddenly slowed, turned once in a tight circle, and stopped in the road. Mason pressed the brake. What now? He asked. The dog came back to the passenger side and placed one paw against the door. Isaiah opened it. Wind rushed into the cabin, carrying heat, dust, and the faint smell of sun-baked metal. Halo did not climb inside. He lowered his head and touched his nose to Leo's radio case, then looked toward the southwest. After that, he pressed his body close to the ground. He has done that twice, Grace said. Touched the radio, looked southwest, then lowered himself. Maybe he wants shelter, Mason replied. Isaiah stepped out. No, he is showing us something. Halo rose and moved toward him. In the stronger light beside the vehicle, Grace noticed a dark stain along the torn edge of the harness. Hold him still, she said. Isaiah crouched several feet from the dog and extended an open hand. Halo watched him, then came forward without hesitation. Grace approached slowly from the side. She examined the torn strap, running 2 gloved fingers over the dried stain. This is blood, she said. Mason looked away from the windshield. Grace checked beneath the dog's thick fur, moving carefully around his shoulders and chest. Halo remained alert but calm, his amber eyes fixed on Isaiah. I do not see an injury that would explain this amount, she said. It belongs to a person. The words settled heavily inside the vehicle. Isaiah looked toward the blank wall of sand ahead. Somewhere beyond it, someone had been close enough to hold this harness. Grace continued the examination. She lifted one of Halo's front paws and brushed away the dust packed between his toes. Beneath the yellow sand was a layer of dark red clay. She checked the other paw and found the same thing. That should not be here, she said. Isaiah knelt beside her. The convoy route crossed pale desert flats and hard gravel. Red clay existed farther southwest, near the old drainage basin, almost 7 miles from the final recorded coordinates. He did not come from the main road, Isaiah said. Mason frowned. The last signal placed them east of us. The last signal may be wrong. Or the dog wandered before he found the command post. Halo pulled his paw free and turned toward Mason. He did not growl. He simply stared until Mason stopped speaking. Then Halo looked back at Isaiah and touched his nose to the radio case again. Leo leaned forward. He keeps choosing the radio. Isaiah opened the case and held the handset where Halo could smell it. The dog sniffed the plastic, then shifted his attention to the canvas medical pouch attached beside it. His jaws opened slightly. Grace noticed a thin blue fiber caught between his front teeth. "Easy boy," she whispered. She removed it gently and held it up against the dim light. It was a short strand of braided thread, bright blue beneath the dust. Grace opened her medical kit and pulled out a roll of securing cord. The colors matched. "This is used inside military trauma bags," she said. "The orange webbing, the blood, and now this." Leo studied the fiber. He was with them recently, Grace said. "This thread has not faded, and it was protected inside his mouth." Isaiah felt the pieces aligning, not like numbers on a screen, but like footsteps forming a path. Halo had left people who were still alive. He had carried a marked strap. He had crossed red clay. He had brought the scent of medical equipment. And he kept pointing toward a radio that could not hear what he had already found. Isaiah stood. "They are not at the last coordinates." Mason looked at the navigation display. "The system says we continue east." Halo stepped away from the vehicle and faced southwest. The wind flattened the fur along his back. He waited. Isaiah looked from the glowing map to the dog. For a moment, the old memory returned with painful clarity. A screen insisting on one direction. A German shepherd insisting on another. This time, Isaiah did not hesitate. He climbed into the passenger seat and pointed beyond the windshield. "Turn southwest." Mason did not move. "There is no marked route out there." "There is now." Mason looked at Halo, then slowly turned the wheel. The Humvee left the recorded search line and followed the white dog into a part of the desert the map showed as empty. Behind them, the last tire tracks began filling with sand. Ahead, Halo ran with his head low and his ears forward, following something no machine could measure. Leo tried the radio once more. Beneath the static, so faint that none of them were certain they had truly heard it, came 3 broken pulses, evenly spaced, and then silence. The 3 pulses did not return. Leo Carter held the radio close to his ear, listening so intently that even Mason stopped speaking, but the channel gave them nothing except the dry whisper of static. Ahead of the Humvee, Halo continued southwest, his body low against the wind. The storm had grown darker now. Daylight no longer seemed to come from the sky. It filtered through the sand in a dim brown glow, turning every ridge into a shadow and every shadow into a possible wall. Mason slowed to less than 10 miles per hour. "I cannot see the ground," he said. "Watch the dog," Isaiah replied. Halo changed direction without warning, angling. Left across a stretch of hardpan that appeared no different from the land around it. Mason followed. A few seconds later, the right headlight revealed a shallow drop where the earth had been cut away by an old wash. Had they continued straight, the front wheels would have gone over the edge. Mason glanced toward Isaiah, but said nothing. The dog stopped beyond the wash and lifted his muzzle into the wind. He turned his head slowly, first north, then west, then southwest again. Sand gathered along his whiskers. His ears moved independently, searching for a sound beneath the storm. Then he started forward. Isaiah watched every step. Halo was not following a visible trail. The wind had erased tire marks long ago. He was reading what remained in the air, in the soil, perhaps in scents pressed low beneath the moving sand. The navigation display showed only an empty grid. No road, no structures, no reason for 4 vehicles to have come this way. "We are 2 miles off the approved route," Mason said. "The convoy would not have turned here without a reason." "Then we find the reason," Isaiah answered. Halo suddenly veered toward a low dune and began circling its base. Mason stopped the Humvee. Isaiah stepped out with Grace while Leo stayed on the radio. The wind pushed hard against them, filling their footprints almost as quickly as they made them. Halo lowered his nose and pawed once at the sand. Isaiah knelt beside him and brushed the surface away with a gloved hand. Something dark appeared beneath it. A nylon strap. He pulled gently and uncovered a military canteen belt, its buckle scratched but intact. Grace examined the faded name written along the inside. "Corporal Daniel Hayes," she said. Isaiah knew the name. Hayes was assigned to Convoy 7. Halo sniffed the belt, then looked toward the southwest again. "They came through here," Isaiah said. Mason stood beside the vehicle, staring at the blank terrain. One piece of gear does not make a route. Halo moved 30 yards farther and stopped near a cluster of black stones. This time he did not dig. He waited until Isaiah reached him, then touched his nose to a small object wedged between the rocks. It was a broken section of red tail light, no larger than a silver dollar. One edge had fresh dust inside the crack. Isaiah held it up. Now it is a route. They returned to the Humvee and continued. The storm reduced the world to headlights, sand, and the white shape running just ahead. Every few hundred yards, Halo found another trace. A dark smear of engine oil on the hard ground. A strip of canvas caught beneath a thorn bush. A shallow groove where a heavy tire had crossed before the wind covered it. The clues did not form a straight line. They bent steadily away from the final coordinates, deeper into unmapped terrain. Leo marked each discovery on his paper map. They were moving southwest on purpose, he said. No loss of control. No random drift. Grace studied the route. Toward the old drainage basin. Mason shook his head. There is nothing there except dry channels and abandoned maintenance cuts. Isaiah looked through the windshield at Halo. Something was there when they arrived. The dog slowed again. This time he approached a narrow rise and stopped at the top, his white coat almost invisible against the sand-bright air. Isaiah climbed out and joined him. From the ridge, the ground below seemed smooth and empty. Then the wind shifted. For one brief second, it peeled a thin layer of sand away from the basin floor. Parallel marks appeared beneath it. For sets of tire tracks, turning sharply south. Isaiah felt the truth settle over him. Convoy 7 had not been taken from the road. It had left the road willingly. Halo descended the ridge before the tracks disappeared again. Mason followed carefully, but halfway down, the compass display began spinning. The navigation screen flickered, then placed them almost half a mile east of their actual position. Magnetic interference, Leo said. There may be buried utility lines under the basin. Mason tightened his grip on the wheel. Or the system is failing. Isaiah looked at Halo. The dog had stopped where the false reading pointed east. He glanced that way once, then turned south and waited. Two directions. One from the machine. One from the living guide who had already brought them this far. Isaiah pointed south. Follow him. Mason obeyed. The Humvee crossed the basin slowly, guided by nothing but Halo's pale shape and the faint traces he uncovered. A few minutes later, the headlights caught something larger beneath the sand. A rear wheel, then a metal frame, then the outline of a vehicle lying at an angle, half buried and silent. Halo reached it first. He did not celebrate. He walked to the open driver's door, looked inside, and gave one low whine. Isaiah approached with Grace beside him. The cab was empty. So were the seats behind it. No Marines. No answers. Only a message scratched into the dust across the inside of the windshield, nearly erased by the wind. One arrow pointed downward. Beside it were 3 letters. Low. Isaiah wiped the windshield with the side of his glove, careful not to erase what remained of the message. The arrow pointed downward. The word beside it was simple enough to read, but nothing about the empty vehicle felt simple. Grace searched the front compartment while Mason checked the fuel gauge and Leo tried the radio again. The tank was nearly half full. Low does not mean fuel, Mason said. Isaiah leaned through the open door. The keys were gone, but the emergency brake had been set. A folded route map rested beneath the passenger seat, still sealed inside its clear cover. No supplies had been scattered. No personal gear had been abandoned except what the storm had already uncovered along the path. Whoever had left the vehicle had done so deliberately, under pressure, but not in panic. Halo moved around the truck with his nose close to the sand. He paused at the rear wheel, then followed a scent toward the far side of the cab. Isaiah watched the dog disappear beneath the angled frame. A moment later, Halo began scraping at the ground. Grace joined him and cleared away the sand with both hands. Something white appeared beneath the surface. At first it looked like a piece of plastic from the vehicle. Then Grace lifted it free and the elastic strap fell loose between her fingers. It was a child-sized oxygen mask. The clear cup was scratched but unbroken. A few grains of red clay clung to its edge. No one spoke for several seconds. The wind moved through the open doors with a hollow moan. Mason looked toward the empty rear seats. There were no children assigned to Convoy 7, which means they found someone who was not assigned, Grace said. Isaiah looked again at the message on the windshield. Low. An arrow pointing down. Not fuel. Not battery power. Not a warning about supplies. A direction. He stepped away from the truck and studied the basin through the moving sand. The land sloped gradually south, almost too gently to notice. Beyond the vehicle, the ground dipped toward a network of dry channels carved by floods that had not come in years. From a distance, those channels looked like safe shelter from the wind. In a storm, they could become traps, filling with drifting sand until the walls disappeared. They went to lower ground, Isaiah said. Leo unfolded the paper map across the hood, holding the corners down with both hands. There is an old service cut less than a mile south. It connects to a maintenance corridor under the basin. Mason traced the faded line with one finger. The corridor was closed years ago. Closed does not mean empty, Grace said, still holding the oxygen mask. Halo lifted his head. His ears turned toward the south. Then he walked past Isaiah and stopped at the edge of the basin, staring into the dust. The dog's body changed. His breathing remained fast, but the rest of him became still. He had recognized something. Isaiah moved beside him. At first, he heard only the storm. Sand whispering over sand. Metal cooling beneath the wind. The uneven rattle of the Humvee behind them. Then Halo stepped forward and sniffed the air. A faint scent reached Isaiah as the wind shifted. Diesel. Not from the vehicle behind them. Fresher. Carried from somewhere lower. There are more trucks ahead, he said. Mason returned to the driver's seat. The ground is too soft near the channels. We could lose the Humvee. Isaiah looked at the remaining time. 51 minutes. Then we stop before the descent and continue on foot. Halo began moving south. The team followed in the vehicle until the basin narrowed and the sand rose in loose waves around the tires. Mason parked on a shelf of hard ground. They gathered water, medical supplies, rope, and portable lights. Leo secured the radio against his chest. Grace placed the child-sized mask inside her bag. Isaiah checked the orange webbing once more, then fastened it to his vest where Halo could see it. The dog waited at the beginning of a shallow channel. His white fur had nearly vanished beneath the dust, but his eyes remained bright and focused. Lead us, Isaiah said. Halo turned and entered the low ground. The walls rose slowly on both sides, cutting away some of the wind but trapping the heat. Sand slid beneath their boots with every step. 30 yards in, they found a second set of tracks. Not tire marks. Footprints. Several adult boots, partly erased, moving in the same direction. Beside them were two smaller impressions, close together and uneven. Grace crouched. A child, she said. Maybe tired. Maybe being helped. Farther ahead, the channel divided. The left passage descended sharply. The right curved toward higher ground. The map suggested the maintenance corridor lay to the right. Halo chose the left. Mason stopped. The corridor is the other way. Isaiah studied the dog. Halo returned 3 steps, looked at him, then turned left again. The same signal. No hesitation. Isaiah followed. The channel narrowed until they had to walk single file. The air smelled more strongly of diesel now, mixed with hot stone and something faintly medicinal. Then the sand beneath Halo's paws changed color. Yellow became rust red. The same clay Grace had found beneath his nails. They were close. Halo rounded the next bend and froze. Ahead, half hidden by the storm, stood another convoy truck. Then a second. Beyond them, a third shape rested near the lowest point of the basin. All 3 were empty. Their doors stood open. A blue medical cord had been tied around the mirror of the nearest vehicle, pointing deeper into the channel. Isaiah touched it gently. Someone had left a trail for anyone willing to look below the road, below the map, below what seemed obvious. Halo did not approach the trucks. He continued past them toward a flat stretch of sand where nothing appeared to remain. Then he stopped in the center, lowered himself to the ground, and refused to move. Halo lay in the center of the flat sand with his chin resting between his front paws. His body turned toward the storm and his eyes fixed on Isaiah. He did not dig. He did not whine. He simply refused to leave. Around him, the lowest part of the basin looked empty. Wind moved across it in long sheets, smoothing the surface until no footprint, tire mark, or broken branch remained. The 3 abandoned trucks stood behind the team like silent witnesses, their open doors shifting slightly whenever the gusts changed direction. Mason checked his watch. We have 12 minutes before we turn back. Grace moved slowly around Halo, searching for another strip of cord or a buried marker. Leo raised the radio and called again. Convoy 7, this is Search 1. Respond on any available channel. Static answered. Nothing more. Mason looked at Isaiah. The dog may have lost the trail when the sand covered it. Halo's ears moved at the sound of Mason's voice, but he did not lift his head. Isaiah stepped closer. He has not lost anything. There is nothing here. There was nothing on the map either. Mason glanced toward the storm-dark channel behind them. We followed him. We found the vehicles. That does not mean the people are still nearby. Isaiah looked down at Halo. The dog's breathing was slower now, controlled despite the heat and dust. His paws were planted firmly beneath him. This was not exhaustion. Isaiah had seen working dogs collapse from fatigue. They curled inward. They sought shade. They closed their eyes. Halo was doing none of those things. He was guarding a place. Grace seemed to understand at the same moment. He is staying with them, she said quietly. Mason scanned the empty ground. With who? Halo lifted his head and looked directly beneath himself. Isaiah knelt. He pressed one gloved hand against the sand. The surface was warm and loose. He felt no movement, no vibration, only the faint trembling of the wind passing through the basin walls. He removed his glove and tried again. The heat touched his palm. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then Halo shifted one paw and pressed it against Isaiah's wrist, holding his hand in place. Isaiah stopped breathing. Somewhere below the wind, below the scrape of sand against fabric, something seemed to tap once. It was so faint that he could not be certain it had happened. Leo, shut off the radio, he said. Leo lowered the volume. Mason, stop moving. The basin grew as quiet as a storm could become. Wind still traveled above them, but inside the low channel, the sound softened into a steady, distant roar. Isaiah kept his palm against the ground. Halo remained motionless beside him. Another tap came, then a pause, then two more. Grace lowered herself to her knees and placed her hands several feet away. I felt it. Mason crouched on the opposite side. His expression changed. Doubt did not leave him completely, but something more urgent entered beside it. Metal, he said. It feels like someone striking metal. Leo turned the radio back on and adjusted the frequency in small steps. Static rose and fell. At one point, 3 weak pulses passed through the speaker, spaced almost evenly apart. The same rhythm they had heard inside the Humvee. Halo stood at once. He touched his nose to the radio, then returned to the exact place where he had been lying. The signal is below us, Leo said. Isaiah drew his field knife and pushed the tip carefully into the sand. 6 inches down, it met no resistance. He tried again a foot to the left. Nothing. On the third attempt, the blade struck something solid with a soft metallic sound. Everyone froze. Isaiah cleared the surface with both hands. Grace joined him, sweeping sand aside, while Mason used a folding shovel from his pack. The wind worked against them, pouring loose grains back into every opening they made. Halo began digging beside Isaiah, fast but controlled, throwing sand behind him in short bursts. Within minutes, a dark metal edge appeared. It was not part of a vehicle. It was wider, flat, and lined with bolts. Leo brushed dust from a faded yellow marking. Maintenance access, he said. This must be the old corridor. Isaiah uncovered a narrow seam along the metal panel. Sand had packed into it so tightly that the door was nearly invisible from above. Grace found a recessed handle, but it would not move. Pressure from the sand, she said, or something is blocking it underneath. Mason checked his watch again. 8 minutes. Isaiah looked toward the way they had come. The trucks were already fading behind the dust. The safe decision was to mark the location and return with more equipment. The disciplined decision was to obey the time limit. The reasonable decision was to trust that whoever was below could wait. Halo lowered his muzzle to the seam. A sound rose through it, too soft to be called a voice. More like breath shaped around a word. The dog answered with one low whine, the first Isaiah had heard from him. Then 3 slow knocks came from beneath the door. Isaiah placed his hand on the metal. It was warm from the desert, but under his palm came the faintest rhythm of life. They cannot wait, he said. Mason looked at the storm, then at the buried entrance. He closed his watch cover. Tell me where to dig. Together they cleared the edges, working in silence while Halo stayed pressed close to the seam. Leo kept the radio open. Grace prepared water and medical supplies. Isaiah drove the blade into the packed sand beside the handle and leaned his weight against it. The metal shifted less than an inch. From below came another weak series of taps. Not random, not fading. A message. We are here. The metal panel moved another inch, then stopped. Packed sand poured through the narrow opening in a steady stream, carrying with it a breath of cooler air from below. Isaiah shifted the field knife deeper beside the handle, while Mason wedged the folding shovel beneath the opposite edge. "On three," Isaiah said. Grace braced the panel with both hands. Leo secured the radio against his vest and moved closer. Halo stood with his nose pressed to the seam, listening. 1, 2, 3. They lifted together. The door rose several inches, enough for darkness to appear beneath it. A weak beam of light flickered somewhere below, then disappeared. Halo dropped to his chest and pushed his muzzle into the opening. From inside came a faint voice. "Halo." The dog's entire body changed. His ears rose. His tail struck the sand. Once. Then he released a soft sound, not quite a bark, not quite a cry, but something filled with recognition. Isaiah lowered himself beside the gap. "This is Staff Sergeant Isaiah Brooks. How many people are inside?" Static crackled through Leo's radio, followed by a strained reply from below. 17. Air is limited. Main exit is blocked. 17. More than the missing convoy. Isaiah looked at Grace, and she understood before he spoke. The child-sized oxygen mask had not been a random piece of equipment. Convoy 7 had stopped for civilians. Halo pawed at the opening, impatient now. Mason pushed the shovel deeper. "We need another 6 inches. Sand continued sliding toward the entrance, undoing part of their work each time the wind shifted. Grace used a canvas medical cover to shield the gap, while Isaiah and Mason lifted again. The panel groaned softly, rose, and caught against something beneath it. A narrow space opened along one side, barely wide enough for Halo. The dog did not wait for a command. He lowered his shoulders and slipped through. "Halo," Isaiah called. The white tail vanished into darkness. For half a second, the old fear returned. Rook disappearing into dust. Rook choosing to go back. Isaiah's body remembered before his mind could stop it. His chest tightened. His hands froze against the metal. Then a bark echoed from below. One sharp note. A signal. Halo had found them. Isaiah pulled the rope from Mason's pack and fastened it around his waist. "Hold this line." Mason looked at the opening. "You cannot fit through there. I can if I clear the inside edge." Grace handed Isaiah a portable light. "The air may be poor. Do not stay longer than necessary." Isaiah nodded. He lowered one arm through the opening, then his shoulder. Sand pressed against his uniform. The metal edge scraped across his vest, but he kept moving until his boots lost contact with the surface. Mason fed the rope slowly. Isaiah dropped the final few feet onto a concrete floor. The corridor smelled of dust, diesel, and stale air. His light swept across an old maintenance passage lined with pipes and faded warning paint. Sand had entered through cracks in the ceiling and gathered in pale drifts along the walls. About 30 feet ahead, several figures sat close together beneath emergency blankets. Halo moved among them, touching each person with his nose before returning to a Marine seated near the center. The man wore a torn K9 handler patch and held one arm close to his chest. Even in the weak light, Isaiah recognized the relief in his face. "Evan Miller?" Isaiah asked. "Yes, Staff Sergeant." Evan rested one hand against Halo's neck. The dog leaned into him for only a moment, then turned toward the others as if his work was not finished. Grace's voice came through the radio above. "Isaiah, report." He counted quickly. 11 Marines. 3 survey workers. A father and a young boy. One older woman wrapped in a tan blanket. 17. All accounted for, Isaiah said. They are alive. We need ventilation and a wider opening. A murmur passed through the corridor, quiet but full of relief. The young boy sat beside his father, holding the edge of the child-sized oxygen line that matched the mask Grace had found. Halo approached him and lowered his head. The boy placed one small hand on the dog's dusty fur. "He came back," he whispered. Evan looked at Isaiah. "He always comes back." A low shifting sound traveled through the ceiling. Fine sand slipped from a crack and tapped against the concrete. Isaiah turned toward the far end of the passage. A section of the corridor had collapsed inward, sealing the original exit. Near it, a portable radio rested beside a metal pipe. Someone had been striking the pipe in groups of 3. "How long has the entrance been blocked?" Isaiah asked. "Almost 6 hours," Evans said. "We moved everyone down here when the storm became too strong. The convoy found the survey team and the family near the drainage cut. Then the service roof shifted and trapped us. Halo walked to the blocked passage and sniffed the air, then returned to the opening above. Isaiah understood. The dog was measuring the safest path, even now. Can everyone move? Most can, Evans said. Some will need help. Another stream of sand fell from the ceiling. This one lasted longer. Isaiah looked up at the narrow opening and heard Mason clearing more ground from above. We are not waiting for heavy equipment, he said. We bring them out now. He raised the radio. Grace, prepare the rope. We send the child first, then the civilians, then the Marines. Halo stood between Isaiah and Evan, watching both men. Isaiah placed one hand against the dog's shoulder. You found them, he said. Halo turned toward the trapped group, then back toward the opening. No celebration. No rest. Only the next person who needed to reach the light. The young boy went first. Isaiah fastened the rescue line around his waist while the child's father knelt beside him, speaking softly enough that the words stayed inside the narrow corridor. Halo stood close, his dusty white shoulder touching the boy's knee. Will he come too? The boy asked. He will, Isaiah said. But right now, he is helping you be brave. The boy placed both hands around the rope. Above them, Grace called through the opening. Mason and Leo pulled carefully while Isaiah guided the child upward. The small pair of boots disappeared into the light, and a moment later Grace's voice returned. He is clear. The father closed his eyes and released a breath he had been holding for hours. They sent the older woman next, then the 3 survey workers, then the boy's father. Each person moved slowly. Each ascent took precious time. The air inside the corridor grew warmer, and fine sand continued slipping from the ceiling in thin, whispering streams. Halo walked between the waiting group and the opening, checking both ends of the passage as though counting every soul. Evan Miller watched him with quiet pride. He has been doing that since the roof shifted, Evan said. Isaiah secured the rope around another Marine, keeping track, making sure nobody gets left. The Marine rose through the opening. Halo followed the movement with his eyes until the boots vanished. Only then did he return to Evan. Isaiah knelt beside the handler. Tell me what happened before he found us. Evan rested his hand on the torn edge of Halo's harness. We saw a civilian utility vehicle near the drainage basin. It had broken down with 6 people inside. The storm was already moving faster than forecast, but we could not leave them exposed. Convoy 7 turned away from the approved route and brought the civilians toward the old maintenance corridor, believing the concrete passage would provide temporary shelter. They parked the trucks in the channel and moved everyone below. Minutes later, wind-driven sand covered the access points and disrupted the radios. We tried the main exit first, Evan continued. Then part of the service cut shifted and sealed it. We had air, water, and medical supplies, but no way to tell anyone where we were. Isaiah glanced at the pipe used for the 3-part signal. So you sent Halo. Evan nodded. The upper panel opened just enough for him. I attached the orange webbing and gave him the scent from our medical bag. Why did he go to the command post instead of the nearest search team? Evan looked at Isaiah's old K9 tag. Because I did not tell him to find the nearest team. Another Marine was lifted through the opening. The corridor grew quieter. Isaiah waited. Evan's expression softened. I told him to find the man who would listen. Isaiah stared at him. The words seemed to move through the stale air more clearly than any radio transmission. You knew me? Not personally. Rook's story traveled farther than you think. Isaiah lowered his eyes. That is not a story I am proud of. The Marines who were there never said you failed him. They said you spent 2 years making sure no one else would repeat what happened. Evan paused, breathing carefully. Halo knows the difference between a person who ignores a dog and a person who is afraid to trust one again. Isaiah looked toward the white shepherd. Halo had settled beside the young Marine waiting near the wall, his presence steady and calm. You expected him to recognize me? I expected him to recognize Rook's tag. Their training unit kept scent records from shared equipment. Halo worked with gear Rook once used during regional exercises. Dogs remember what we think time has erased. The revelation struck Isaiah with a quiet force. Halo had not wandered through the storm and chosen him by chance. He had carried a command, a scent, and a memory. He had crossed miles of empty desert, searching not for the closest human being, but for one wounded man who might finally understand the cost of refusing to listen. A deeper rumble passed through the corridor. Dust fell from the pipes. Grace's voice came sharply over the radio. Isaiah, the surface is shifting. We need everyone out now. 4 Marines remained below, including Evan and Isaiah. Mason widened the opening from above, while Leo maintained the line. Isaiah sent the 2 most mobile Marines first. The 3rd refused to leave Evan, but Evan pointed toward the rope. That is an order. When the man was safely lifted away, Isaiah secured the line around Evan. Halo stepped close and pressed his forehead against the handler's chest. Evan held the dog's face between his hands. You did good, he whispered. You found him. Halo's eyes stayed on Evan as the rope tightened. Isaiah supported the handler until Grace and Mason drew him into the light. Then only Isaiah and Halo remained beneath the desert. Another soft shift moved through the ceiling. The opening narrowed as sand poured over its edge. Send the dog, Mason called. Isaiah fastened the rescue harness around Halo, but the shepherd pulled away and stared at him. Not this time, Isaiah said. You are not going back for me. We leave together. Halo stepped forward and placed one paw against Isaiah's boot. Isaiah clipped the line to both of them. Above, Mason began to pull. They rose through dust and dim light, side by side, until cold wind struck Isaiah's face. Hands reached down and lifted them onto the surface. The storm still roared across the basin, but every missing person stood beneath the open sky. Evan lay wrapped in a blanket near the trucks, watching Halo emerge. The dog crossed the sand and rested beside him. Isaiah followed, carrying the orange strap in one hand and Rook's tag in the other. For the first time in 2 years, the memory did not feel like a door closing. It felt like one opening. By the time the storm began to weaken, the basin had become a place of quiet movement. No one celebrated. There was too much work left to do, and too many exhausted people learning how good open air could feel. Grace moved from person to person, checking breathing, offering water in careful sips, and wrapping blankets around shoulders coated with dust. Mason and Leo guided the civilians toward the Humvee while the Marines from Convoy 7 helped one another across the soft ground. Isaiah remained near Evan, Miller, and Halo. The white German shepherd had finally lowered his head, but he had not closed his eyes. Every time someone moved toward the vehicles, his ears lifted and his gaze followed until that person was safely accounted for. He is still counting, Evan said. His voice was tired, yet there was warmth inside it. Isaiah watched Halo scan the basin. 17 went down. 17 came up. Evan rested a hand on the dog's back. He will not believe it until he sees them leave. Far above the channel, the sky slowly changed from brown to pale gold. The wind lost its sharp edge. Sand still drifted over the abandoned trucks, but the storm no longer seemed determined to erase everything it touched. Leo finally reached the command post by radio. His words broke apart in static, yet the message carried. All missing personnel located. 6 civilians found with them. Medical assistance requested at the North Basin shelf. Captain Lauren Mitchell answered after a long pause. Copy that. Search 1. We are coming to you. Isaiah heard something beneath her professional tone. Relief. Perhaps disbelief. Perhaps both. When the first rescue vehicles appeared through the thinning dust, Halo stood. He watched each one descend toward the basin. He did not move toward the sound of engines or the people calling his name. He remained beside Evan until Grace placed the handler onto a transport stretcher. Only then did Halo walk alongside him, matching every turn of the wheels. Before Evan was lifted into the medical vehicle, he reached down and touched Halo between the ears. Your mission is complete, he said. Halo looked at him, then at Isaiah. The dog's amber eyes held the same quiet patience they had carried when he first emerged from the storm. Evan followed his gaze. Maybe not all of it, he whispered. 3 weeks later, the desert had returned to its ordinary silence. The basin remained closed while engineers inspected the old maintenance corridor, and Convoy 7 had become a story repeated across the base in lowered voices. The official report credited navigation skills, field judgment, and canine training. It listed every decision and every recovered signal. It did not explain how Halo had crossed nearly 8 miles in a storm, found one specific Marine among hundreds, and refused to leave the exact patch of sand beneath which 17 people waited. Some things fit neatly into reports. Others did not. Evan recovered steadily, but his medical review ended his work as a canine handler. On the morning he returned to the training field, He wore civilian clothes and walked with the measured care of a man learning a new pace. Halo sat beside him, freshly groomed, his white coat bright beneath the rising sun. Isaiah waited near the fence. For several seconds, none of them spoke. Evan looked down at his partner. He needs someone who will not mistake silence for uncertainty. Isaiah felt the old tag beneath his shirt. He already has someone. Not anymore, Evan said gently. Not in the way he deserves. Halo stood and crossed the space between them. He stopped 3 feet from Isaiah, sat, and waited. No command had been given. No leash changed hands. The decision seemed to belong to the dog alone. Isaiah lowered himself to one knee. You took your time, he said. Halo tilted his head, and for the first time, Isaiah saw something almost playful beneath the discipline. Evan smiled. He wanted to be certain you were listening. Isaiah removed the chain from beneath his shirt. Rook's tag rested beside his own, its edges worn smooth from years of being held during sleepless nights. He had once believed carrying it was a punishment he owed the past. Now he understood that memory could be something else. Not a weight, a compass. From his pocket, he took the new identification tag prepared for Halo. He threaded it onto the same chain and let the 2 canine tags rest side by side. Rook, Halo, one dark-coated dog who had tried to warn him. One white dog who had crossed a storm because someone believed Isaiah could learn to hear the warning at last. Halo leaned forward and rested his head against Isaiah's chest, directly over both tags. Isaiah placed one hand along the dog's neck. The morning sun stretched their shadows across the training field. One man and one shepherd standing where grief had once told them there could be no new beginning. Evan turned away slowly, giving them the privacy of a farewell that was also an arrival. Isaiah looked toward the brightening desert. He did not call what had happened a miracle. Grace did not either. Mason said it was training. Leo called it loyalty. Captain Mitchell wrote that it was exceptional field instinct. Halo offered no explanation. He simply stayed beside Isaiah as the wind moved softly through his white fur, and somewhere between the 2 metal tags, the past stopped sounding like an ending.